Walchandnagar Industries. This is an exclusive conversation. It's one of India's key strategic manufacturers, a nearly a century-old company. We're speaking today about what could be the impact of this new move. Chirag Doshi, the MD and CEO, is joining in for more on this. Mr. Doshi, thank you so much for speaking with us on NDTV Profit. It's an absolute pleasure. Just your first thoughts of what is the kind of appetite once this actually goes through, and of course it will go through the whole legislative process, winter session of parliament will be discussed, etc., etc. But if and when it goes through in this form, what is the appetite in the private sector for nuclear power, and what does it mean for you as a company?
So thank you first of all for having me this morning. I think it'll be a game-changing decision by our country when this legislation goes through. I think the appetite is very high. We've been in conversation with many of the large private sector players who would be keen on getting into nuclear power. And I think their appetite seems to be, everyone seems to be very keen on this. There's a whole renewable energy angle to it. There's a hydrogen angle to it. So notwithstanding the entire peak load requirement of our nation, if we are to get into large-scale manufacturing. So I think the appetite is great. We've been in touch with a lot of the private players. I think we just need the legislation to go through, and then we'll be ready for what will probably be a multi-fold ramp-up of nuclear power execution in our country.
Mr. Doshi, can you give us, and good morning to you, this is Alex.
Morning.
I was wondering about certain technical aspects as much as you can explain it to us. My understanding is that fission relates to these large reactors, something like a Fukushima or various other places in the world, right? What we're talking right now is small modular reactors, which might just be opened to the private sector, where you have fusion technology. Is there a difference in the fuel? Is there an availability of that fuel and technology here with us? As I understand it, this is currently only done in the US.
No, that's not accurate, in the sense that whatever we are going to open up to the private sector will not just be what is known as small modular reactor. It's a term that's been kind of thrown about a little bit. I think as far as the private sector is concerned, they would want access to us for them to build even the 700 megawatt PHWR, which is really the mainstay of our country. That is nuclear NPCIL's domain as it stands. I think that is what is going to create the scale for us in this country. Small modular reactor, Bharat Small Reactor, which is actually our old 220 megawatt, which we've manufactured in the 1980s and the 1990s, also working on uranium, is an option which is being worked on to see how we can modularize it, make it easier to manufacture, easier to put in smaller areas that require maybe sort of captive energy requirements. But for the country's 100 gigawatt play, I don't think we're getting away from the 700 megawatt PHWR. And then if you go sort of 5 years on in technology, what we talk about small modular reactors, maybe 30 megawatt, 50 megawatt, 60 megawatt, that is a technology that the government is funding through their R&D initiatives. We're also working on developing our own capability and technology. There is no small modular reactor actively working in the world today, right? There are maybe 60, 70 companies all over the world who are experimenting with it. Maybe 1 or 2 in Korea, Russia, maybe 1 in the US are in trials. But I think small modular reactor is an area that will play out in 5-7 years. I think the private sector will want to first get an economies of scale with the 700 megawatt PHWR and then evolve that over time. That's the way we see this play out.
Mr. Doshi, good morning, Neeraj here. And that would be the question. A lot of people say that the nuclear space suffers from the NIMBY effect. It shouldn't be in my backyard, right? Do you believe that scale can come in the next 5-7 years? And is it profitable relative to the other sources of power to do it at subscale?
Yeah, so I think that's actually been the challenge that we've all faced, even as a manufacturer of core equipment. I mean, as you know, Walchandnagar makes the most critical equipment for every nuclear power plant that goes into the dome or in the nuclear island. But we've also faced that problem that because there's been an inconsistency of order booking, you have a hard time sort of creating profitability and even keeping manpower from that perspective. I think what will happen now, and if you look at Prime Minister Modi's desire, which is we want to put up 90 gigawatt in 22 years, right? That's 4 gigawatt a year. We haven't done, I mean, it's taken us 25 years to do 8 gigawatt. So that kind of scale, even if you tone it down and say, okay, we don't get to 100, we get to 75, that gives manufacturing companies and private sector the opportunity to build out on a regular basis with scale, and that gives us economies of scale that allows them to bring down the sort of levelized cost of power over a, and don't forget, as far as nuclear power is concerned, the levelized cost of electricity is spanning 45, 50 years, not 10, 12 years. And so when you take that into account, and for us as manufacturers, it allows us to bring our costs down substantially. I think at least the numbers that we've seen with some of the private sector players, it's meaningful and can be brought down to as much, if not lower, than thermal and solar as well.
That's very interesting. Mr. Doshi, so I'm just trying to get a sense in the conversations that you've had, are these large companies and private players talking about usage for their own purposes, like captive power, or are you talking about selling that power out? Because ultimately a nuclear plant, you wouldn't have the issues of not dealing with peaks and troughs, right? It's available at all points of time.
Yeah, so it's definitely not just for captive. I think this is a pure play supplying electricity to the country opportunity. I don't think it's financially viable for it to just to be a captive play, and I think everyone is looking at it as part of their power generating portfolio. Combined with thermal, solar, hydro, and all other areas. So, and this cannot be a captive play. This is, the country needs this. It requires nuclear power to be a very, very large contributor to our country's base load requirement. And I think that's the play that I think all of the large conglomerates that will get into private power, private nuclear power plant ownership will focus on.
Mr. Doshi, just last question, and one part of it is broad and one is specific to Walchandnagar Industries. A lot of policy sounds great on paper, but the implementation becomes a key task. What is the kind of timeline you see for any of this actually coming to fruition, and what does it mean specifically for your company?
Yeah, so you're right, and obviously we've depended too much on policy to drive business, and you get through these unfortunately years of gaps which cause problems. But today, the way we see it, with or without, even without the private player participation, we've seen NPCIL, NTPC now already issuing fleet mode reactor orders to us as a manufacturer. So we're already executing nearly 300 crores worth of nuclear orders today as we speak. Those orders will get executed in the next 2 years. We expect NPCIL and NTPC to give us more orders next year, or let's say the year after, which will continue India's sort of investment in nuclear power. And if the private sector comes in, I expect private sector orders to start flowing in maybe by 2027, which is about a year and a half to 2 years from now, keeping in mind if they are approved in the winter session, land acquisition, technology development, and then sort of issuing the order. So I don't think the private sector will issue orders to us till 2027, 28, but we expect a fairly large number of new reactor orders from NPCIL and NTPC, most likely over the next 12 to 18 months. So we're fully geared up and ready to go. We're in fact making a new investment at our Walchandnagar facility that will that will create a new dedicated brownfield facility only for nuclear power expansion, which will sort of triple our capacity to deliver over what it is today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Mr. Doshi, so very quickly, what is the value of the investment that you're making there? At what point will it be completed? How is it being funded? And also, no, the purpose of our chat, so we got sidetracked a little bit because we were so excited about the announcement yesterday, but we have to ask you about the lockout at your Satara plant, which is ending, and what are the implications of that?
Yeah, okay. So just on the nuclear side, we are kind of putting in our plans. We think the investment in just nuclear will be somewhere in the region of 150 crores. We're not clear how we're going. I mean, we've not kind of closed on the funding mechanism, but it will be done in the next 6 to 12 months, so that we can start investing the money by the end of say December 2026 to be ready for whatever increase comes by 27 and early 28. So that's the plan as far as nuclear is concerned. As far as the lockout is concerned, the foundry is a decent size business for us. It constitutes nearly 1/10 of our revenue, if not a little bit more. But it doesn't really fit. It's not a supplier to our existing defense nuclear aerospace business, but it is an important cog in our wheel. There were some labor issues there. We had to do a lockout. We've spent the last 3-4 months negotiating with the workforce. Obviously, as a group and a family, we do believe that our businesses need to start rather than be shut. So luckily, the union has been fairly receptive to our conversation. The factory will start in the next month once maintenance is done, and we should be back to sort of 100% capacity in the next 3 months. And we've also agreed with the union that the manpower cost, which is obviously our largest cost in that business, will also get brought into the company on a phased basis as the business goes up, and not have sort of that liability from day one. So I think the union has been great. I think our management has been good, and
Right.
I think I'm glad this problem is over.
Absolutely.
But focus on defense, nuclear, and aerospace as our sort of growth driver.
Absolutely. Mr. Doshi, thanks so much for a lovely conversation. And I think you painted a lovely picture for us. And heading into 2030, those ambitions sound incredible. Let's see how they get executed.